What up YouTube, it's Clormo with part number 7 of my Logic Pro X tutorial series for sample beats, and this will be specifically part 7a, EQ and mixing basics. The reason I decided to split part 7 will be EQ and mixing basics on part 7a, part 7b will be effects. That's because I want to keep those topics separate, not give too much info in just one video and make it confusing. That being said, in this tutorial I'll be concentrated with the channel EQ and how to do some frequency visualization to make your beat sound as decent as possible before a professional takes them and mixes them and masters them. And in the end, although you should strive to learn these concepts and do it yourself to make sure that your music sounds as best as possible, even if a professional hasn't looked at it, and if you have the time to invest on it and make it sound even closer to a professional with the concepts that you're going to learn here, then go ahead and do it. I'll also talk about some basic mixing concepts so that you learn them and practice them and see and start to understand why mixing is so important, not only for beats, obviously for any type of music that you're gonna make. In part 7b I'll be talking about some basic effects that you should start to use if you are not using them at this point, which could be reverb, pitch, delays, overdrive, and who knows what other one. Really, in that part I'll be doing much more improvisation that I have done in my previous videos, but it'll be good to understand, and I promise that you will learn something out of it. I don't really see the value of me telling you 100 effects that you could use if you are probably gonna use 10 in the end, and really the music making process should be one where you go and start to discover what sounds good with what. So it'll, like most of the stuff that I'm doing here, will be a little bit more basic, and then later on in the future I'll probably just make a more detailed video for those that just want to learn about that specifically. So let's go to Logic and let's start the tutorial. I have two tracks. One track has some drums, the other track has some other elements from a loop, from both our Apple loops, and this is because it's gonna help understand a little bit better the basic idea of the frequency visualization and also the basic ideas of behind mix. So in part number 6 I spoke a little bit about the EQ bands and how to access the EQ channel, which is very simple. Let's just recap that. One way is just go to your EQ thumbnail and double click it. That's gonna bring a channel EQ, and then I will undo that, or you can just go to your audio effects, EQ, channel EQ, and it will bring your channel EQ, which is by default the EQ that Logic uses, right? There are 8 bands in your channel EQ. Let me move it to the center a little bit. So this right here are your bands or your filters. You have 8. You have your 2 filters on both ends. You have your 2 shelving, your 2 shelf bands, which are these 2, and then these 4 in the middle are your parametric EQ bands or filters, which give you a more of a bell-shaped filter in your EQ. And I'm gonna turn them on and do some stuff with them so you can see them, but in recapping, that's your 8 bands there in your channel EQ. For example, your filters are by default, they're turned off, and we saw a little bit of this in part number 6 when we're dealing with baseline sampling. Your filters, once you turn them on, they start at both ends, so they will start at the very end of the frequency spectrum. And what you can do by dragging is that you're gonna cut off all of you're gonna be cutting off the sound right at the frequency cutoff point. From there on out, in this case I would be cutting at the 2350 Hertz frequency range all the way up to the 20K. I will be cutting off all of those high frequencies from here, and this is really all that the filters can do. Like in the other end, you can do the same for the low frequencies and cut them off completely. You have your your frequency range, you have your slope or your gain, right, which is your vertical axis, and then you have the bandwidth of that. So let's say I wanna take this filter and extend that bandwidth. You see what happens, right? It's gonna cover a little bit more, and this is just dripping and boosting up a little bit here, and that's because if I try to catch it again, right, I can just boost in a sense just in one sharp corner based on the slope and that I have given it, but really the filters are used more to cut off sound, right? So I'm gonna turn them off. Probably should just turn them back to, so when I turn them on again, it doesn't conflict with my stuff, with my other stuff that I want to do. And then your shelf, they one starts at the 75 hertz, and then the other one starts at the 7500 hertz. And that would be your frequency cutoff point, but you can obviously move them and make them start in a different frequency cutoff point. And what this does is it can boost or it can cut off, right? But it won't cut off completely from your cutoff point, either to the left or to the right, as the filters do, because it's a little bit more of a gentle boost or cut, not like a total cutoff of your frequencies, either on the low or the high. So the shelf EQ bands would be used, if you want to give a full range of frequencies, you want to just boost them a little bit or just bring them down a little bit, then you can do this that I'm doing here, drag up or down, and then you can sweep your frequencies and just make a little bit more of a gentle cutoff than in comparison to the filters. Then your parametric bell EQs would be these four guys here, and what they do is they're parametric bell EQs because they give you a bell-shaped type of filter that you see how my cursor changed here. I can drag it up or down and change the gain, and I can also change the bandwidth, which is also known as the Q. So I can either boost or cut off very specific frequencies or very specific areas of a frequency range. And this is good because when you have your channel EQ, you won't necessarily be using all of them. And let's say that you have a drum break or a kick, and you just want to highlight that kick and highlight the low frequency of the key. You're probably best off finding the kick, I should say, the frequency of the kick with your parametric bell EQ, and then boosting it up a little bit or cutting it off a little bit, and then so on and so forth with any other sound that you have in your frequency spectrum. With that out of the way, what I'm gonna do is also bring up the channel EQ for my second track, and now I'm gonna listen to the drums with and without any EQ, so you find out the difference. So that has no EQ at all. And now, as I mentioned in part number 6, I will bring up my analyzer so I can see, and I will zoom in my gain axis so I can have a look at it. And maybe I zoomed it too much. So from here I can tell that my kick leaves about in this area here, and my snare is a little bit all over the place, like with my hats in this range here, about 2K all the way to the 10K. Well, probably drops off here more in the 6K region, but you get the idea. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring the volume a little bit down. And now let's say that you have something like this after you have done some basic mixing on your drums, and you just wanna, again, let's take the example of the kick. I wanna just make the kick sound a little bit more. Let's say, well, 15 is a little bit too much, but you can start with wherever you want. You can pull it all the way up to 24 if you wanted to, just to exaggerate the sound, and then you can fine tune it. But let's start sweeping this to see if notice how that kick sound lifts here. You know, we can see that from the curves, and that's what it means by frequency visualization. You have your drums cover all of the frequency spectrum and the different, you can see it here, and you can boost or cut some of those frequencies and alter the sound of it. So that sounds a little bit like not what I want. So it seems that around my, oops, I moved the shelf. So it seems like between 100 and 80 something, it's where my, that, you know, that oomph of the kick is. So let's say that's what I want, and I'm just gonna bring it down a little bit now from the 15 decibels that it was. Now let's say I wanted to, I like the sound, I'm gonna bring it up again a little bit. Now let's say that I wanted also to boost a little bit more around where that oomph is. I will just be changing my bandwidth, right, which you can do graphically here as well. Oof, and it's clipping because I'm, so you see the difference here. I'm gonna stop that for a second. So really that's all you need to know. I could end the tutorial right here. I mean, the EQ portion of it, but I won't. I'm just gonna say a few things. Like, that was for the drums. When I go here to the second track, I'll do it a little bit quicker, but just wanted you to notice that there's gonna be a different frequency visualization of it, obviously, because it's gonna be a different sound. It's not drums. So what you need to take out from this that I've just told you, when you are EQing something, it's in Logic Pro or any other program, but especially in Logic Pro with the channel EQ, it's not that difficult to deal with this. You're gonna be seeing your frequencies, and your sound will dictate how you want it to your music, and your beats to sound is gonna dictate what you're gonna boost or cut, right? So if you either boost or you cut, and you can use your shelf or your cutoff filters, and just basically think of it as if you were like molding clay, right? You're gonna mold the sound so that it accentuates what you wanna accentuate. Like if you wanna have your kick be in front of your mix of your sound, if you want your snare to be above everything else, if you want your hats to be on top or in front, or however you want to call it, that's really what EQing is in layman's terms, right? In rice and beans, like we in Puerto Rico we would say, right? Like, this is how you deal with that. Now what I'm gonna do is I made that for the kick. I'm gonna play a little bit again. Let's say that I wanna just bring down some of that very top of the high frequencies for the snare, and then boost a little bit. I think there's a cymbal in there too, but I didn't really want to take it off the sound of the mix completely. But you see, this is very gentle what I did here. I didn't go all crazy going up and down. Again, you're free to do whatever you want. Be creative, right? I always say that. So pay me no mind when I say you don't need to go crazy. But you see, I didn't do much here. Didn't go crazy. That's what I mean by didn't go crazy. I didn't do that much, and really made a difference on how those drums sound. And now let's take one last listen now with the EQ, and I'm gonna turn it off so you can hear the difference. That it's very different to this, in my opinion. Don't know what you think, but you can leave a comment if you don't agree with me. So that's really the basics of what you need to do when you're dealing with EQ and EQing your sounds and your music. Not that complicated. It obviously takes years to master it, and there are experts out there. You practicing it and making sure you understand it, you understand the basics of it that I just showed, will help you deal with those professionals, with those experts, right? When people tell you, like, oh, I usually EQ my snares in this way, you will understand what that person's saying, right? So it's very important to understand it. So I think this is very valuable information for you to really understand what EQing is and practicing doing it yourself. To formally close on the EQ, I just wanted to make a note about the presets. You have presets in your channel EQ, and these are your presets right down here. They're in different categories. So my advice, use them. You know, like, just because they're presets, don't feel like, oh, if I use a preset, I'm gonna be a rookie, I'm gonna be lazy. You know, use them in the sense that, let's say I bring this Brighton hi-hat preset. Look what's happening here. It's cutting off a lot of the lows, boosting some of the highs in the 5K area, and then cutting off some of the 10K, and then boosting a little bit here with a shelf. If you bring your presets and you start doing that type of I don't want to say analysis, but you start to look what each are, and then playing your sounds and seeing how the sound change, noticing how it changes based on what you're using. It's also gonna serve for practice, and it's gonna help you visualize this and understand it even more. And even then, no matter if they're presets and you might feel lazy, sometimes a preset will do the job that you're looking for. Remember, it's your sound, so if you want something to sound a certain way and a preset gives you that result, use it. Don't be afraid, don't be shy to use it. So homework for you, if I would be your teacher in school and tell you to, this is your homework for tonight, not only do what we just did here, look through your presets, and you can use this here. You can start by the very top one like I did. If you press the left and right, you will go over the different presets and pay attention to how every sound starts to change based on the presets, because that's also going to give you more information, more knowledge on how your sound will be and how you are gonna EQ your particular stuff, right? So pay close attention to that. And now I'm gonna just do some recapping. So without looking at the analyzer, if you learned anything or if you have been paying attention from track number 1, you should see, right, this loop covering a good range of the spectrum, right? You can hear those boom. That boom will be there. You can see it in the graph, and you can see all this other stuff here. So let's say I wanna just do a sharp cut there, and then use my shelf to that's just something weird, right? I just wanted to, with EQ, with no EQ. Sounds clearer. And when you're using loops, you probably wouldn't do a lot of EQing, because this, I'm pretty positive that these are already like mixed and EQ'd already and then put as a loop. But you may want to do some boosting and cutting anyway on whatever you have, and you notice the difference here. Drums, which leave, your kick lives in this region here in your lows, and it's easy to identify, easy to see. Your snares in this area is easier to see too, and then something that has a lot of elements, which is a little bit more difficult to see, and there your 4 parametric bell EQ bands are gonna come in handy, so you boost and cut those sounds that interest you more out of the mix, right? I will apologize too. I don't know if you can hear that wind. It's probably gonna make its way in the recording. It's very windy outside here in Mass today. So anyway, I'm gonna unmute. I'm gonna mute both of them. I'm gonna make sure my EQs are turned on. I'm gonna save that file. And now some basic mixing. When I say basic, I mean it. You know, I won't sit here and tell you every little philosophy that's out there about how to mix, or why some stuff it's in what frequency range and how you should mix it and all this and that, because one, you should be letting a professional do this for you in the very end. You know, if you're serious about it, if you're working with an artist on a big project, on a formal project, right, you should have in your team somebody that specializes in mixing and mastering. But two, right, I will treat this as basic, because even though you should be using a professional, as I just say, you have to have a good idea of how to do this and practice it, right? And this is because when you're dealing with a professional expert, like I said before, then you can understand what his language at least. And then you can also use these basics in practice if you have the time to dedicate it, right? And come up with something that's more than just a decent result, right? You should strive to do that. But if you're a beginner, this will be more than enough for you to go and do it yourself, learn it, understand it, and then let somebody take care of it that has more experience than you. Experience comes with time, so as time goes by, you will feel more comfortable doing this and trusting more what you do in your mix. So you know, mixing it's not that super complicated until you really know what you're looking for. Same goes with EQ. And you can spend hours trying to get the perfect harmony between all sounds, but that's really what mixing is. Getting everything to bond together. All the sounds have their place in the mix, and you will decide which ones are more prominent than others. That's really what mixing is. So what I wanted to talk here, to keep it basic, the elements that you will consider in your mixing, or some of the elements that are very important and obvious. It's your panning, which you control with your pan knob, right? So you want, let's say, your drums to be layered, right? You want your kick, your snare, anything else in separate tracks, and then you want your kick in the center, you want your snare a little bit to the right, or you want your hats a little bit more to the right, and then you want let's say you have a tom, you want it to the left, and so on and so forth. These are things that, again, keeping it basic, I'm not saying do exactly that when you're mixing your drums, but it's how you will decide how everything falls into the mix. So panning, your gain and your volume fader, right? You'll decide how loud or how quiet some of the elements in your mix are. Your EQ also affects your mixing and comes into play in your mix. Also effects and mastering. Mastering will also come into play with your mix, and they go hand in hand, because you're mastering your final product, your final sound of your music will only be as good as your mix is. If you leave everything right down the center, and with every fader in the plus area and everything's clipping, you can try to master it, or someone that's gonna master it is gonna hate you for it, because you didn't do your due diligence, or at least made some pre-work to make sure that your stuff was where it needed to be, and with the proper volume levels that it should have, and then that person just took it from there and just made it better, right? Just made sure that whatever you wanted to bring forward in your mix, it's properly brought forward without clipping or without distorting your sound. So those elements are very important, and it's nothing more than just coming here. I'm gonna play these two together. That actually doesn't sound that bad. Didn't realize it. So now let's say I'm just gonna do some very rough mixing. I'm gonna take this orchestral loop and move it a little to the left. Bring the volume a little bit down. I want my drums to sound a little bit more. Let's bring my default again. You see, when you're doing this real time, you start missing stuff and EQing. Pay attention to if anything's clipping, even though it won't matter this much at this stage before you do your mastering. Always make sure that you don't have anything clipping. I'm gonna take that filter off, and I'm gonna actually accentuate the highs a little bit more. And let's say I want to put some delay, some tape delay. Let's make it half a note. little bit crazy, huh? So there you have some very rough basic mixing concepts and stuff that you should do. All I did here was bring up my tracks, right? My tracks window, and you can achieve that by pressing X in your keyboard. And you can also have this as a separate screen, as a separate window. If you didn't know about it, you can do that. So it's good to see when you're mixing everything at the same time, see how the levels are coming, how each is interacting with the other one, and that way you'll be able to see, similar to your frequency visualization when you're EQ, and you'll be able to see if in reality your, let's say for example, your drum should be that loud, or if your other elements should be as loud, or if they should be in a different area of the sound spectrum, as I want to call it when I talk about the panning. And to a few notes to close this section of the tutorial and the tutorial itself. Think about, have you been in a concert recently? Have you seen any videos recently of a band playing or stuff like that? Pay attention to how a band arranges their instruments, right? Like, okay, so they have your drums are here, there's a guy with a guitar over to the right, there's a guy with a bass over to the left, there's a guy with the synths over back there, and so that's how you should treat your when you're mixing. That's a good way of visualizing and thinking about it. Your speaker placement is also very important. Right now my setup, if I were to show you, is not my speaker placement is not the best, because I don't have my own place right now and can't do a lot of, I don't have a lot of freedom to do stuff here. Go ahead and practice. And one last note that I wanted to make also, when you are dealing with tracks, and let's say that you have a little bit, you're one of those that has a little bit more experience that you're watching this. If you have a track with a lot of effects and VSTs and so on and so forth, and it's taking a lot of memory from your computer, bounce your tracks in place so that you only have the resulting wave or MP3 or sound file, and then you can get rid of the track that had all the other elements, so you can free up some space and then work with that. Because believe it or not, that makes, sometimes depending on what system you have and how powerful your system is, or if you don't have a lot of memory and so on and so forth, it could give you false results. And then sometimes you are listening to something through your headphones and it may sound quite good, but then when you take them off, it sounds like crap. It's different things that you should be paying attention to. I tried to keep it basic. I know I threw a lot of words in there, not much doing inside of Logic Pro, but I apologize if that sounds too boring. But really, if you take what I just told you about these two things and start putting them in practice, you will see that you're gonna understand it more, because there's two things that can happen when you don't know anything about any of this EQing or mixing. You will open your channel EQ and go, oh, I know that's how I EQ my music, but I don't know how to use it. And then you're either gonna slap a preset that has nothing to do with what the sound is, or you're just gonna close it and not use it. Same with the mixing. You go like, okay, so I know that if I move this here and if I move the fader, I change where stuff is, but I really don't know what the drum should be. I really don't know where the guitar should be, so I'm not gonna do it. I'm afraid it will sound like crap. Don't do that. Just do it. Just go in and start doing it by yourself, and you'll get better at it. That's really all there is to it. I know there's people out there that are gonna tell you, no, things should be done this way, period. Experts could tell you that, and I would tend to agree if it's an expert and he gives me a very good reason for it. But keep in mind that it's your sound. You should be creative. You should do you. And if you think that you're sound or your instrument should be all the way to the left, put it all the way to the left. It's, who's gonna tell you anything? Somebody can tell you, oh, that doesn't sound great, I don't like it. Well, don't like it. There's people that are gonna like it, people that not. So just keep that in mind. So with that, again, thanks for people that have subscribed. Thanks for commenting on my videos, liking them, sending me messages through Twitter and Facebook and all of that. You know who you are. So as usual, if you like this video or if you disliked it, use the like and dislike buttons appropriately. Share this video, comment on this video, help me spread the word, subscribe to my channel. Leave me any comments or questions if you want to see stuff in the future. I have a long list of videos that I want to work on, but I kind of also use some guidance from some of you. Follow me on social media, the Twitter, the Facebook, the Instagram, the SoundCloud, Google+, all that good stuff. My webpage, www.clormoindustries.com, and you can hit me up on my email as well, clormoindustries@gmail.com. I'll see you in part 7B with some basic effects, and then part number 8 will be some basics for mastering. Part number 9 I will do a whole beat from start to finish, and then I will come up with other videos and other series. So thanks for watching once again. Peace out, YouTube.